Next week's the PGA Championship. I'm a golf guy, and I love talking golf with our next guest, John Feinstein. This is going to be a little bit different. Golf will be talked about here. I'm holding up the book right here. It's Feherety, the remarkably funny and tragic journey of golf's David Feherty. The one and only John Feinstein joins us now on the Adam Gold Show. I started at the back of the book, John. I started with
you mentioned that.
The second to last and the last chapters, and I'm working my way backwards. Is that normal? Because I wanted to start with the chapters on Live Golf, but man, this had to be an emotionally draining book for you to write.
Yeah, it was, and the last two chapters that you mentioned came about when I was almost finished writing the book. And when David decided to go to Live, I sent him a text and I said, really? I have to rewrite the last two chapters so you can make a couple million measly extra dollars? And he wrote me back and said, it's not a couple million measly extra dollars. It's considerably more than that. And, obviously there are going to be people who will criticize everybody who's gone to Live, because we all know it's sports washing on the part of the Saudis.
Yeah, sure.
And we all know how evil the government there is. But the same is true of China. The NBA does business with China, and Russia, and clearly the Olympic Committee, and Qatar with FIFA. And I'm not trying to make that as an excuse. That doesn't make it right for anybody. But here's what I've thought about, because I've given this a lot of thought, as you might imagine, since David's a good friend. If somebody came to me and offered me stupid money like that, would I turn it down? Well, I hope so, but I can't sit here and tell you for sure that I would. Because Harold Varner III, who's a North Carolinian, as you know, said when he went over there, it's generational money. And David was in going into the last year of his contract with NBC. He knew they were going to retire Roger Maltby and Gary Koch, who were in his age group. David's now 64. And this was 5 years of guaranteed stupid money. So I can't sit here in judgment of him for doing it. And he seems to be happy in the new role. When Greg Norman first called him, he said, "We want you to be our John Madden." And that's the way they've treated him. So I have mixed emotions about it. I'm not going to lie to you. I told David that, but I do understand why he made the decision he made.
John Feinstein is joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. I said this all during the Live Golf controversy, that there are many reasons to be critical of Live Golf. And you mentioned the real reason for me is Greg Norman. But there are many reasons to be critical of it, and I will not use the source of the money as one, because if the public investment fund wanted to start a sports radio station and called me, I'd be hard pressed to turn them down. So I would not ever use that as a reason. But I want to get into a little bit about, just how exhausting it must be to be David. He's so talented, and he's so funny, and he's so smart, but he's also so tortured. And there's tragedy in this. This book made me cry like 4 different times. I've probably read a third of it, and I've already cried 4 times from reading the book. That's why I asked, was it exhausting to put this together? There's so much tragedy in here.
Yeah, and you make a very good point. And, of course, I knew going in what I was going to be dealing with in terms of David's life story, most notably, of course, the death of his son, Shay, 5.5 years ago. And I had talked to David right after Shay's death, and in fact did a magazine piece on him right after Shay's death. And something like that, it changes you forever. It can't not change you forever. And as you said, David already had all sorts of issues that he had dealt with in his life, including his ongoing alcoholism and his battle with it. He will tell you that he white knuckles every day trying not to drink. He's gone up on and off the wagon on a number of occasions in his life. He flunked out rehab when he tried to go there. He just walked out after 12 days because he couldn't stand it.
Right.
And he had a terrible first marriage. He has a great second marriage, thank goodness. He will tell you, and means it, and I believe him, that if not for Anita, he probably would not be alive.
Yeah.
He's dealt with serious injuries, and he had drug addiction problems at one point. And so you're right. And grew up. I didn't even mention he grew up during the Troubles in Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
Which is not a normal way to grow up. And he said he didn't even realize it until he was older and not living outside of Belfast, that it was not normal to hear bombs going off every day, to have people dying every day, to have ID checks all the time, because that's the way he grew up. It was the only life he knew as a kid. So that's why the subtitle is The Remarkably Funny and Tragic Life of David Feherty, because it has been both. And your point is well taken about how exhausting I know it is for him. He takes drugs to try to sleep. He takes, I think, 13 different drugs every day, manic depression, in order to sleep, in order to deal with being bipolar. I mean, he's had so many physical and emotional issues. It's never ending. And yet the most fascinating thing I found in spending a lot of time with him, and we did it a lot in public, we would meet in restaurants and stuff like
Right.
that. And we'd sit in a corner table. But, of course, inevitably people would recognize David. And David is an introvert by nature. You'd find that hard to believe watching his show, watching him on television, even watching his stand-up act. But he is. And yet when people would come up to him wanting a selfie, an autograph, to tell him a story, whatever, he acted like that person was his best friend in life. And both his kids, his surviving kids, Rory and Aaron, told me that one of the things they're most proud of about their father is the way he treats people. People who aren't important to him. To me, that's the way you judge someone, how they treat someone who's not important to them. And Rory, not named after Rory McIlroy, by the way. Rory Feherty older than Rory McIlroy. But Rory and Aaron, when you look at your dad, who's a celebrity, it's not the celebrity that's important to you. It's how they deal with people and how they deal with you.
Well, your next child will be named Rory. I know how you feel about Rory McIlroy. John Feinstein.
I wanted him as a son-in-law, so maybe as a child.
John Feinstein is joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. Just piggybacking on that, and news of the day to a certain extent, how Feherty treats people. So his first event at Live happened to be in New Jersey. And it also sort of didn't coincide, I don't believe, with 9/11, but there was a 9/11 group, a remembrance group that was protesting the fact that this event was there. It was so close to ground zero. And Feherty, who is now an American citizen and fiercely pro-military and feels very strongly about 9/11, actually went outside of his hotel room. I'm trying not to give too much of the book away. There's tons in here that we haven't even discussed. But he actually went out and spoke to these people, knowing that they were angry that they were even there.
Yeah, he did. And they were there on Sunday morning, the last day of the tournament. And then David was having breakfast and heard that there were protesters outside. And they had been outside the tournament grounds during the week, and it was very difficult for anybody to get to or from them because it was at a Trump golf course and the Secret Service was all over the place.
Right.
But there were no Secret Service at that point, and David just walked outside and said that he wanted to hear what they had to say. He understood the tragedy that many of them had experienced on 9/11. And in a way saying, I don't think they're reasonable to feel upset. And I don't think they're being unreasonable to be concerned. And it didn't mean he didn't go to work that day. He did. But he listened to what they had to say. He said they were beyond civil. They were kind to him because I think they appreciated him walking out and saying, tell me what you think about all this. And again, that I asked Anita, David's wife, who is one of the heroes of this book, why she went on a second date with him. Because on their first date, David showed up drunk.
Yep.
And when they sat down at the table, he took a straw, leaned across the table, and drained her drink. At which point she just said, I got to go. And to go out on a second date with him after that. And she said, because I sensed a kindness in him, even drunk. And she said, I think David gets, her word, a lot of mulligans in life because he has a generosity of spirit that people can sense in him. And I think that's true. I always felt that from the very first time I met him years and years ago, that he's somebody you like right away. And I think that's a big part of his story because, as he will tell you, he's made plenty of mistakes over the years. I mean, for goodness sake, he got arrested on the grounds at Augusta National because he'd been drinking and he was going in to do the 11:30 show with Jim Nance and was going to move his car to get it closer to Butler Cabin for when the show was over. And because he'd had a few drinks, he ended up on the par 3 golf course. It's not a good place to be in a car. And he ended up in Ziploc handcuffs, and the cops were ready to take him away. And Jack Stevens, they called Jack Stevens, who was the chairman of Augusta National, and said, what do we do with this guy? And Jack Stevens said, let him go. Let him go. Now, that's got to be the only time in history that somebody was let off the hook by the Lords of Augusta.
Wow.
They take themselves very seriously, as you well know, Adam. And
yes,
Jack Stevens just liked David.
Wow. Well, they let Tiger off the hook once, but that's a golf story for
and a different kind of off the hook. That's because they wanted him on TV on Saturday.
Exactly. No question about that. Literally, I have like 3 minutes left, but I want to ask you about two quick things. The first is I'm a little upset that part of the NFL's wording about why they're going to have Jets-Bills Monday night to start the season is because, well, there will be added emotion from 9/11. I can't be the only one who is kind of turned off by using a tragic day in American history as sort of a reason to amp up celebration?
The NFL has been wrapping itself around the flag for about as long as you and I have been alive, Adam. They do it all the time. And you know, they're going to wrap themselves around the flag that night. There's no question. You could pick any game and play it on 9/11, and it's going to be emotional because it's 9/11. I mean, I was at a Navy Air Force game 2 years ago when Saturday was 9/11, and it was extremely emotional. But then you play a football game. But that's the NFL. I mean, if Roger Goodell knocked on my door and said, "Hey, I've got news for you. The sun's going to rise in the west, in the east tomorrow," I'd check out the western horizon the next day.
All right, final thing. I agree.
By the way, one last thing on Feherty before you ask me the last question. That was what was so great about working with him on this book. He never pulled a punch. He answered every question. He dealt with every, like the Augusta story I told you. And at the beginning of the book, when there were a couple things I said, do you want to leave this out? Do you want to leave that out? He said, no, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. And I think from reading the book, that's true.
I haven't gotten to the front of the book yet, John. I'm working my way backwards. I apologize. I apologize for that. Like the first 4 or 5 chapters, I haven't even gotten even close yet. Finally, Coach K is going to be a consultant to the NBA.
Yep.
Is this good for college basketball?
I don't know that it's good. I don't know that it's bad. I mean, I wish he'd been a consultant for the NBA when they wrote the new CBA and didn't get rid of the one and done rule, which I thought was going away and which I still think is pox.
I think that's good for college basketball.
The one and done?
Yeah, I think it's good for college basketball.
We need to do another show on that because I don't. I think it's better to let
talent
kids turn pro coming out of high school if they want to, and then have a baseball rule that if you go to college, you stay 3 years.
I think it's bad for the players that they can't go right to the NBA. But I think ultimately, even if it's for just 1 year, I think the college game is better for having those players.
Well, I understand, and I wrote a column saying that when they first passed the rule, by the way, and then decided I was wrong because, and although in today's world with the NILs and the transfer portal, what I thought was wrong about it was that it made the notion of going to college even more fraudulent than it already was. But you and I are in agreement that players should be able to go straight out of high school
Yeah.
if they want to. But
Yeah.
anyway, to answer your question about Mike, I don't know that it's good for college basketball. I think Mike was always fascinated by the NBA when he coached the Olympic teams. He
Mhm.
enjoyed his relationships with the players, enjoyed coaching players at that level, and he and Adam Silver are friends. You know, Adam's a Duke grad, and I also think that even though Mike was busy in the last year, and doing speaking and stuff for
Yep.
Duke and the Emily Kay Foundation and all that, I think he'd like to be a little busier. I think he feels if he doesn't stay busy, he's going to get old. No, I
Well,
mean that. I'm not even being
no, no.
sarcastic. I think a lot of people, when they get into their 70s, they don't want to slow down too much.
Right.
And if I ever get into my 70s, I'm just going to stop if I can. But everybody's different.
Freeze it. 45 books, and the 45th one is Feherty, The Remarkably Funny and Tragic Journey of Golf's David Feherty. I'm holding it up because we're also on TV now, John. I
Oh, good.
appreciate your time. Oh, yeah. Appreciate your time. I will talk to you very soon. Thank you.
Thanks for having me as always, Adam. Take care.